What a powerful movie. It was,
Oh,
very well done.
thanks,
So I
friend.
want to on that.
Thank you. And thanks for watching.
Now, I was reading that you had a personal connection to this when you took on the story. Is that right?
Somewhat. My dad was a naval aviator, 30 years behind Jesse Brown. So when I first got this script, and obviously was crying my whole way through it, I found myself with this kind of strange opportunity to obviously not just get to honor and share Jesse and Tom's story, but I kind of stumbled into a way to also kind of get to tell my dad's story too. And that is just, you always look for a personal connection to the work, but for it to reach so specifically into my life, definitely made this movie feel more like a calling than just something I wanted to do.
That is extremely meaningful. And I'm sure your father, told you the story about Jesse Brown as well growing up. And
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Not obviously, I know Jesse's story a lot more after 3.5 years of working on the movie, but I knew his name because it's you kind of always know the names of the firsts, But I think now having made the film, my dad's now seen the movie. I'm just growing comfortable with the fact that like he'll probably never like anything I make more than this, and that's okay. It's. I peaked early, so it's all good. It's all good.
no, he's probably so proud of you. And just, I can't even imagine how that feels. Just, emotionally, kind of connecting with your father and your background and his background and everything. So
no, it's been very wild to sort of have this massive creative endeavor, like also just bring my family in closer. That is so rarely the case.
yeah, especially with Hollywood,
Yeah, exactly.
Hollywood parents, I'll see you later.
Totally. I'll never talk to you again. No, but that's it's been quite the opposite, as my parents came to set for like more than half of production. So,
Oh,
very different. Yeah.
and was he able to kind of, recommend different, strategies that you're showing the planes and stuff like that in terms of kind of the logistical things?
What was honestly kind of a trip is that he did, if I had a question about like, okay, approach angle of attack and, whatever, he could speak to that. But where he was honestly more useful was the sort of for the emotional stuff, like, hey, when you were really like emotionally beat up and, you've been out to sea for 2 months, like, where did you hide? Like, where did you go try to collect your thoughts, and asking him like up front, the first time you went on cruise and you're going to leave for half a year, like how and where did you tell mom? How did that conversation go? And that stuff ended up being oddly more important to give sort of the emotional reality to what he did, to just make that authentic. I was so surprised how often I relied on that more than all of the sort of like technical aspects of, military consultation.
Well, I do think the movie portrayed marriage so beautifully. Like it was such a wonderful kind of depiction of their love. Can you kind of expand upon that? Because that was one of the key themes in there, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing I feel like you always get told, and gratefully this was not the case on Devotion, but first thing you get told in like a military movie is like, cut the family stuff. We got to get to the conflict. And that was just never going to be the case with this movie. I mean, I think to understand how Jesse was where he was, you had to understand how much love surrounded him, and the woman that like quite literally powered him through this incredibly isolating journey. So to cut Daisy out of the film kind of cuts the heart out of the movie, and ultimately, given where the film ends and the conversation surrounding that, if you don't understand what Daisy sort of, what she has tasked Tom with, the movie doesn't make sense if you don't get that, So, and I also just, it's 1950. It's hard to be black, and especially so in the time and where Jesse is. so to give us the space to also focus on his joy, to also focus on his love, we had to give him a rich life with Daisy in the movie.
Yeah, she was his, supporter and such a strength for him. And, I do think that added a lot of depth to it, just the movie overall, and depth to Jesse's character, because, he's tough. And then at home, you kind of see it in a different way. And so, knowing his story, I don't know if you met any of his family to kind of get his personality down, or I'm sure that was kind of a big thing to kind of pinpoint his personality. Was that true to who he was?
Yeah, I mean, and look, I mean, Jesse passed away a very long time ago now, and there are fewer and fewer people who have spent time with him still alive. So the process was kind of twofold. On one end, and Jonathan's mentioned this in a really beautiful way, but like, you learn about Jesse through his impact to others, and that sort of trickles down into the family still to this day. And, of course, the Adam Makos's book, because of how much research Adam had done, an incredible resource. We worked closely with the families on both sides, throughout this entire process. So, you have anecdotes, you have, these sort of tales and legends that have managed to, stay alive through the decades. But then there is this quiet little space where you kind of have to invent based off of everything that but no one else was at the table with Jesse and Daisy in their kitchen in 1949. Like, no one else was there. So you kind of have to take everything that you can, put it in the stew and and sort of build it from that. I owe the world to Jonathan and Christina for doing that as richly as they did.
And the respect, yeah. And all the respect. They've told me to wrap up. Oh, it was so good.
We can do one more. Let's do one more. Let's do one more.
I thought the movie also talked about character, and how to be of good character. And, that was really the meaning of, war is always going to be war. There was some line about war is always going to happen. But it's who you are in the midst of adversity and leading people. So can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite, it's one of my favorite lines in the movie. Like, put him in a little bit of trouble and you'll figure out who he really is. I think it's easy to be good and passive, and certainly a part of Tom's journey is, what does he have to give up? What does he have to give up to be there for someone, and that becomes a really big part of the modulation of their friendship, and again, not that these themes always need to be so like hyper overt, but to just put modern words to it. I mean, being a good person and being an ally are actually not the same thing, and there is a devotion and there is a sacrifice required to actually be there for somebody. And that's something that Tom learns. I mean, that's something that he has to learn. So that was really, I think, fun, but also important to just say that in a way that, again, without being insanely on the nose. But, I think audiences have a better vocabulary for this conversation now. And, it doesn't have to be so 1993 movie binary where it's like, thumbs up, credits, and, high five, and it freezes and credits roll over the high five. It doesn't have to be so, so simple. So just to give it a little bit of nuance was, always the dream.
And then what you fighting for?
Show off.
That was pretty good.
It's good.